Um, Talking about the Four Agreements book by Don Miguel Ruiz, and I really enjoy the book. And so I wanted to do circles on each of the four agreements. So we're doing agreement one today. And agreement one is be impeccable with your word. So, impeccable, the definition is in accordance with the highest standards of propriety, faultless. So, when you see be impeccable with your word, the kind of like obvious thing you might think it means is don't lie. And the first time I saw that, like the name of the agreement, that's what I thought. But if you get down into it, it's actually much more complicated and complex than that. The author, Don Miguel Ruiz, says that this first agreement is the most important and most difficult. And I've done some work on that myself. Words, very important. So important. You can like inspire people with words, you can create things, you can bring joy. You can bring not so fun stuff like sadness and anger and heartache and disappointment. Words can hurt, and a lot of times we don't realize how powerful they are. But if you say insult someone's appearance, we, the ones who did the insulting, may not think of that ever again. But the person that was insulted is going to be carrying that with them much longer than we will. So words hurt, obviously. And I wanted to read a little excerpt from the book that was an example of this. So it says, there was a woman, for example, who was intelligent and had a very good heart. She had a daughter whom she adored and loved very much. One night she came home from a very bad day at work, tired, full of emotional tension, and with a terrible headache. I can relate to that because I get migraines.
Yeah.
She wanted peace and quiet, but her daughter was singing and jumping happily, like kids do.
Yeah.
Daughter was unaware of how her mother was feeling. She was in her own world, in her own dream. She felt wonderful and was jumping and singing louder and louder, expressing her joy. She was singing so loud it made her mother's headache even worse. And at a certain moment, the mother lost control. Angrily, she looked at her beautiful little girl and said, "Shut up, you have an ugly voice. Can you just shut up?" So, that's not really what the mom meant, like she didn't mean the daughter had, an ugly voice, but she was struggling and she let it, she let herself lose control, unfortunately. The problem is that little bitty interaction that may not seem that important affected the daughter for the rest of her life. She never wanted to sing again. Her mother told her she has an ugly voice, right?
Yeah.
So I think that story is a really good example of how much power words hold. It was only one, 30-second moment for the mother, but for the daughter, that could last the rest of her lifetime. She may never want to sing again because every time she thinks about it, she's going to be remembering her mother saying, "You have an ugly voice."
Yeah.
Very powerful.
Yes.
So, and words have been used in some horrible things in the world, like the Holocaust. The author, Don Miguel Ruiz, he actually uses Hitler as an example of someone who used their words powerfully and, for bad rather than for good, basically. But showing how important words are and the kind of power they hold. So he talks a little bit about, the word in general and why is it powerful. And he says, I'm reading a little bit more here. He said, your word is the power that you have to create. A lot of the things in this book, he kind of tinges with a little bit of Christianity, which I've been Christian before. Like, I understand it, and it doesn't bother me in this book. I don't think like he's trying to shove it down my throat or anything. But this part, he has he mentions the Bible. He says, the Gospel of John in the Bible, speaking of the creation of the universe, says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word is God. That's, obviously discussing how powerful the Word is. And he goes on to say, through the Word, you express your creative power. I mean, that's how we manifest. It's just so important. It really is a power. It's our creativity. It's our magic. I mean, you can make so much happen with just your voice. So just going into a little more detail of how truly important your words are, right? So once you realize the power, so we briefly discussed, don't lie to other people. That's kind of like a baseline of what be impeccable with your word means. But one of the things about it that some people might not think about is being true to yourself. That is part of being impeccable with your word. If you're like keeping yourself kind of tamped down and not you're truly who you are, that's part of not being impeccable with yourself. So I did have something like where it's hard to be true to yourself. I actually had a situation like that yesterday. And I was at a family member's house. Me and my mom and her husband, and then we were over at aunt and uncle's, having dinner and all of that. Well, there had been a lot of talking leading up to dinner where people would kind of be talking off by themselves, but things that I didn't morally agree with, things I personally feel I should stand up for. There was some casual racism thrown in. There was homophobia thrown in. There was transphobia. That's the other word I was trying to think of. That was thrown in, just so much. And then it would die down and I'd be like, okay, I'm okay. I'm having fun talking, when we're not discussing stuff like that. I just don't want to cause a conflict. And I didn't want to cause my mom problems, So I was just trying to I'm not gonna say anything. I don't want to start crap. Just get through it. But eventually after dinner, the topics came back around again. And some things were said by my uncle that are just things that adamantly go against what I stand for. And I finally felt like it was too much. Like I could not sit in that room anymore. And I finally said something. I said something in response to the last thing he had said. And then I said to my mom, I'm sorry, but I can't stay here anymore. And I had driven my mom and her husband and me all there because we all live like 40 minutes away and, ride together. And I was like, I'm sorry, but I can't stay here anymore. And thankfully, my mom supports me. She wasn't like, mad that, we had to go ahead and leave then or anything like that, which is great. So we left, and it's difficult. It's really difficult in some situations to be true to yourself, but that's part of being impeccable with your word. Are you giving yourself the chances to truly, express what you feel and, so you're not just sitting there closing in on yourself going, oh, I hate this. I don't want to listen to this anymore. And yeah, it's an experience that I haven't had to do before. And I was glad I was able, to sort of stand up. But I'm so not a confrontational person. I had so much anxiety going. I was texting with my husband because he understands. And I was like, I don't know what to do. Before I ever stood up and said anything, I'm like, I don't know what to do if I just sit here and listen. It's a form of approval. And I just at a certain point I finally felt like I had to do something about it, and yeah, it wasn't fun, but I did it.
And that's good because like, and expect more of that because you're a witch.
Yeah, definitely, right?
But I feel like I think that's our job though. Because so you already know my background. You
Right.
already know, yeah, and you already know what I stand for.
Hmm.
And so a lot of the times I found myself speaking out against things that I don't agree with, injustices.
Right.
I've delved into the same Bible that a lot of other Christians use against,
Right.
and stuff.
Right.
And it's gonna get even worse because because I joined up with Planned Parenthood now, and I'm a volunteer captain. So it's gonna get a
Awesome.
whole lot worse. But you just have I. It takes practice, and I know that sucks, but like
Yeah.
yeah, but like the more you do it, the less anxious you become. So
Right.
like yeah, so like for instance, I'll just do something very very near and dear to my heart. It was transgender issues. You said
Right.
my sister, she's a transgender woman.
Hmm.
She's not out of the closet yet, and the
Right.
reason why is because she lives with my parents still. She's saving up to get her own place. She's gonna move out in December, but until then, she can't say jack
Yeah.
because parents don't agree with it, and they're liable to kick her out. And I'm in Killeen and she's in Dallas, so we can't really do much there.
Yeah.
And so it's it's yes, be impeccable with your words, but also be smart.
Yes, definitely.
Yes, because like I'm not gonna get up and say I'm not gonna get up and say, hey, I'm a witch and my fiance is a Muslim
Hmm.
to a Westboro Baptist church service.
Yes, yeah, that's not the time. And it's just not the time.
Oh no, unless we want a good old fashioned barbecue, then yeah, sure, go ahead. But
Right.
yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to add my 2 cents in there. But I think for the most part, what you did, I I think you did really, really good. You you set a boundary and you were consistent with that boundary, and I like that.
Well, thank you.
So it's just a yeah, so it's just a matter of setting a couple more boundaries.
Right. Yeah. And it's hard. It really is.
Yeah.
Um, so the other part that I go into with be impeccable with your word that I think not everyone thinks about is it's not just um, against others or even just our own, be true to ourselves. We actually lie to ourselves a lot, most
Yes.
people. Like we make promises to ourselves and like don't keep them. So, an example, maybe you've had a hard day at work, you're driving home and you're like, oh, I'm not doing anything this evening. I just want to relax. I'm going to have some food and then chill, watching some TV or, reading or whatever is relaxing to me. Take a hot bubble bath. But then you get home and you see things that need to be done. You forgot to take the trash out that morning, so you start gathering the trash up and, I'll relax after this. But then while you're doing that, you see something else that needs to be done and you're like, oh, let me get that done and then I'll relax after that. And you keep doing that until it's bedtime. And you did no relaxation. You're even more tired than you were when you were coming home. And that's one of a lot of ways that we lie to ourselves. And it's interesting because we can see what it does when you lie to another person, but we don't necessarily see what it does when we lie to ourselves. And we tend to, especially women, especially mothers, and those, with uteruses for the most part, there's kind of this underlying ingrained thing in our culture that women should sacrifice themselves for everything, for our children, for our spouses, for our family and friends. And like we need to sacrifice ourselves in order to take care of them properly. Um, we sacrifice ourselves emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, even. and we feel like this kind of ingrained thing that's in a lot of most women, I would say, is that we feel guilty if we try to take care of ourselves. We feel like we're being selfish and we should be taking care of someone else. And that's one of the things I see as a major problem with most people who identify as a woman. It's part of our culture. I mean, you still can hear things like, you know, a woman has a new baby and she's going to go back to work, and you know, you're being selfish. You don't need a job right now. You need to stay home and take care of your baby. Why would you be that selfish? You know, things like that. Um, and we end up like emptying ourselves, and we don't realize that if we're emptying ourselves for everyone else, we don't have anything left to give anymore.
Right.
So if we truly, you know, want to be able to take care of the people in our lives, and those who identify as women generally have that sort of nurturing, I want to take care of people. And so we want to do that, but like we have to take care of ourselves first, or we can't do that properly.
I agree with that. And I'm going to give you an example.
Okay.
A friend of mine, she is agoraphobic. She cannot walk outside to save her own skin. But she's good if everyone comes to her inside. One day we were doing a Reiki attuning, and I asked her about her inner child. And so she keeps on saying, well, I'm good to my inner child. I give encouragement to her. I make sure she's okay. I'm like, okay. So you also know that children do the behaviors we model. They don't do what we tell them to do. They do what they see. And she's like, yeah. And I also told her, well, you tell her these things. You're beautiful. You're smart. But you don't tell yourself those things. You talk down to yourself. How is she ever going to? Yeah. How is your inner child going to trust you and the words you say when you lie to yourself and you continually downgrade yourself?
Right, exactly.
And I agree with that too. In order for us to give our best, we have to be at our best.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. We'll take that in there too.
Yeah. So what I was thinking about, you know, how difficult it is for people to understand that sometimes is if we look at, you know, someone else. So like if you have a child and they want to go to the park and you're always saying like, we'll do that tomorrow, we'll do that tomorrow. And then it ends up being like 2 weeks before you take them to the park. The child is going to learn to not trust when you say, we'll do that tomorrow, because every time you say it, it doesn't happen. And you can take that and apply it to yourself as well. If we lie to ourselves, we don't trust ourselves because we lie. So we have the same impact on ourselves than we do on others. It's just harder to see that.
Yes, I agree with that.
So I've talked a little bit before about self-love. You and I have discussed it. And it's a very important thing to me. I feel like it's part of my purpose in this life. I feel like my purpose is working with those that have a more feminine energy, because we all share a lot of the same struggles and internalized, you know, patriarchy and misogyny. And there's so much out there like trying to hold us down. And we get so overwhelmed with it. And, you know, there's unfortunately some women kind of even become kind of like brainwashed. Like it's so ingrained in them, they don't even realize it's there or that they're adding to it. And so self-love, with those with the more feminine energy, that's what I feel like I'm basically called to help with. It's something that I've already told you that I've worked on so much on myself. And because I've been able to make improvements, I feel like it's my job to help others do the same, because it's such a struggle. And I feel like the being impeccable with your word actually has a lot to do with self-love. If hang on, need a drink.
You're okay.
My throat gets dry so easy. I always have to keep like water by me.
Don't worry.
So a large majority tend to struggle with self-love, masculine and feminine energy people. Um, but I'm more called to that feminine energy.
Okay.
So this first agreement, be impeccable with your word in regards to self-love. So to love ourselves fully, I feel like we can't lie to ourselves. If we're excuse me, if we're insulting ourselves, putting ourselves down, like you said about your friend, I think, it's the opposite. We're not loving ourselves. We're making ourselves more miserable, and we're not being honest with ourselves either when we're doing that. So, the kind of thoughts that go through a lot of our heads, we're ugly, we're fat, we're unlovable, we're stupid, we're not worthy, like all of these kinds of things are the opposite of self-love and that first agreement of being impeccable with your word. So we need to be saying I love you to ourselves. Like you said, she's working with her inner child, but she's not doing that to herself. And that's, something she's going to need to do to really kind of move forward. Yeah. So we have to kind of use that agreement of be impeccable with your word on ourselves by, when we have those thoughts, when we're thinking, oh, look at my stomach and my stretch marks, it's ugly, something like that, to counter that and go, no. Excuse me. I hate how dry my throat gets sometimes. To kind of counter that stuff. All right, hang on again.
You're okay. I just got back inside. And
oh,
yes. Oh my gosh.
You said 3:30. It's 3:29.
Well, I speed, so.
There you go.
Okay.
Hang on. I don't know what my throat's doing right now.
I don't know either. Speaking of self-love, have you been able to like incorporate more of your witchy magic into your self-love routines?
No, because I'm horrible. I'm so good at being like, I'm gonna do this. The follow through, no, not as good. I don't know what's up with my throat at the moment.
I think you're okay.
I know you're not like being like, oh my God, she's coughing so much. Like I know you're not doing that, but
oh no, I'm looking for my charger.
It's frustrating.
Okay. Well, it is. It's not okay, but like I hope you're doing okay.
Yeah.
My phone charger, my phone battery shit.
Oh no.
Okay. Sorry, keep going. I'm listening.
All right. That's okay. Give me some time to recover. So when we're looking at ourselves, if we're insulting ourselves and not doing like what we really should be doing with ourselves, it's another form of not being impeccable with our word, right? So we should be honest and positive with ourselves, because most of the time the things we're thinking, these insults, are not true, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you say I'm fat and you are overweight, I mean, maybe that's technically true, but fat generally is an insult. Like if you say someone is fat, that's generally an insult. It's not just a statement of fact, like I am a woman. It's a completely different thing. So it's not loving to ourselves. And the body has its problems. We all have our inner struggles, especially those with feminine energy. From the media, everybody's thin. For a while, thigh gaps were a big deal. I don't know why that became a thing. There's so much put on our physical appearance. And, so our physical body might have some issues. And when you're trying to love yourself more, that might make it difficult, right? So, like, I have chronic pain and chronic fatigue. This comes from a lovely list of medical conditions as well as medications. And it would be really easy to fall into that and be like, my body is crap. Like it's so bad, I'm in pain all the time and I'm tired all the time and all of that. But part of being impeccable with your word, I think, is looking at the truth. And in truth, my body is doing the best it can at the hand I've been dealt, yeah, I have a lot of chronic medical conditions and I'm on a lot of medications and I have pain and I have fatigue, but my body is handling it the best that it can. And that is the thing to focus on more than, something's wrong with my body. I don't like it. I wish I had a different body. All that kind of stuff. Because that's all super unhealthy for us mentally, right? It's not great. Our bodies are working to keep us going. And it doesn't matter if the body is overweight or has stretch marks or is in pain a lot or whatever it may be, your body's still doing the best it can. And it's so much better to go into the truth of it rather than the lies of, my body's broken. It's not broken. It's working the best it can, right? It may not be considered completely healthy. That's true. But it's doing the best it can. And this is my vessel in this life. And, be thankful for it, right? Like if you didn't have the body, you wouldn't be here. You might be like a ghost haunting a house. I don't know. That could be fun. But I just feel like that really applies to be impeccable with your word too. Because the things you say or can say about our bodies generally aren't actually true. We're kind of lying to ourselves and going down that rabbit hole of negativity when the truth is much better and much happier. And it'll make you feel better if you can, go to that instead. And that all applies to just us as a whole person too, not just our body, but mind and spirit and soul and emotion and all of the things we have. All of this still applies to that. So the bottom line is words have power, right? That's the biggest thing. And we don't realize, like the example of continuing to tell a child tomorrow. Like we can look at that and go, yeah, that's not a good thing. Don't do that to your child. But we do the same kinds of things to ourselves constantly. And that's, I don't know, that's how I look at to be impeccable with your word for ourselves, which I think is just as important as with other people, right? What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with all of it. What you said is it's, and I always say that witchcraft is essentially just counseling with extra steps. So
yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's something called CBT or RABT, and that's emotions influence your thoughts, thoughts influence your behavior. If
Right.
none of if those aren't aligned, then there's something out of whack. So there's a dissonance that's being caused. So let's say somebody cheats on you. Somebody cheats on you, you feel emotional, you feel upset, you feel sad, and then it translates to those negative thoughts, like say, I guess he doesn't love me. He doesn't love anybody. I can't love anybody. I can't trust anybody. But then that behavior translates to you masking it or you hiding it or you getting angry. Emotions, thoughts, behaviors.
Yeah.
So yes. And unfortunately, a lot of the practitioners I see nowadays, they don't understand that. They think, just do a spell and it'll be fine. It's not fine because magic works in the path that's easiest. So if you've been doing a good job and you perform a spell so that we can keep your job, you're still going to get fired because you've been doing a horrible job.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that. So words impact too.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like words and intentions, that's what does our magic, right? Just saying it and setting that intention of what we want to happen, that is our magic. That's how we do it. All the other tools aren't really necessary. They help, maybe they can enhance, but it's all, to me at least, it's all words and intentions. Definitely.
It can be, yeah.